a kerem which would start out being large and now got diminished in size. If there are enough vines there left to plant, there are enough vines left that there are 10 in a base saw. Now, a base saw is 50 by 50, 2,500 square amos. You might want to mark that down if it's hard to find out to remember. But it doesn't have to be exactly 50 by 50. Again, it could be any configuration of 2,500 square amos. Okay. Base saw. Okay, so if you have within those 2,500 square amos, you have 10 trees left, and they're planted in the proper form for a vineyard, which is two, a row of two next to the row of three, then that's considered to be Harezin Nikra Kerem. Now here it's a little bit, the gear's a little bit messed up here. It should be Harezin Nikra Kerem Dal. It's called a poor Kerem, but it's a Kerem. So the word Dal is transposed from after the next word Kerem to after this word Kerem. And then the next line says, Kerem Shenotur Buvya. If you have a Kerem which is mixed up, in other words, the plants are not, the trees are not planted in straight rows. If you can find an area in that mixed up Kerem where you can get two opposite three, Kerem. Those trees constitute a vineyard. I mean, if not Eno Kerem, then you do not have a vineyard in that location at all. Anything which looks like a kerem to people, not particular that it look exactly like the classic case which Chazal give us of 3 in one row and 2 in the next row, or rather anything which can be taken to look like a kerem is a kerem. Rabbi Yochanan said, He karachas kerem shechorav. In the previous parak we learned about a karachas kerem, about a kerem which got a bald spot in the middle. In this parak, we're learning about a kerem shechorav. It's a kerem which lost some of its trees all around it. They're both the same idea. Karachas kerem makrichem also. So just karachas kerem, the bald spot kerem is in the middle. Kerem shechorav makrichem also b'kol star. The kerem shechorav meaning that it's missing some of its trees, so it's missing some trees, not in a specific spot in the middle, but scattered all around it, on all sides. Now, here comes a sugya which is really, really very tough, but it's with the pictures it's pretty easy. Rabbi Zira from this sugya is going to take us almost to the next Mishnah. Rabbi Zira mechavi l'chavraya. Rabbi Zira showed his buddies, his friends, the chevra, teisha shurin min shova shova. 9 rows of 7 each. That's picture tzadik test. See picture tzadik test? 9 rows of 7 each. He said, in this scenario, I'll show you how the Mishnah works. Nasav shura para shura l'shasi. Take a row in the middle on the up and down, which is kuf, right? You took out a row in the middle on each one, and then nasav shura para shura l'erev. Then take out a row in the middle on the sideways, which if you flip the page, you'll see his picture kuvalf. Now you took out a row sideways. So now you start out with 63 trees, 9 by 7. Now you're left with 20 trees. You see that? 5 by 4. Is that clear? Okay? Because you took out a row in the middle on each side. This is a kerem shechara, but it was still not down to 10 trees yet. How are we going to get down to 10? That's the question. Okay? So it says the Gemara, Nasav tarte mikah, take 2 on each side, the tarte mikan, and 2 on the other side. And here there's a typo in the Gemara, it should be tarte mikan, and 2 on this side and 2 on that side. And chada mikah v'chada mikah. In other words, take from the east side and the west side, well, let's say on the northeast side and the northwest side and the southeast side. Actually, that's not correct. Well, not according to this picture. It really doesn't matter. It's not germane. But here, you took 2 on the northern perimeter on the east, 2 on the northern perimeter on the west, and 2 on the southern perimeter on the east, and 2 on the southern perimeter on the west. And you took 1 more each on the east side and on the west side. So now you're left with the middle tree in the top row, 3 trees in the second row, 5 trees in the third row, and 1 tree in the fourth row. How many trees altogether? It should be 10, right? So you're left with exactly 10, okay? So we've started out with 63, and now we're down to 10. Now says the Gemara, says Rabbi Zira, Nishtai Rusham, here's a big typo of the Gemara, Nishtai Rusham Asora Gfanim. There are 10 left. Of these 10, this is what we learned in our Mishnah, Esa Gfanim Lebeisah, that you have 10 Gfanim, Lebeisah, 10 of these left in a Beisah, so it retains the character of a vineyard. Why? Because in 4 directions you have a vineyard. Now that's manifest in picture Kuf Gimel. Picture Kuf Gimel is manifest that you have a vineyard in all 4 directions. Picture. We're talking about a vineyard where you start out with 63 trees, he ended up with 10, and still has the status of a vineyard. We're at the picture Kuf Gimel. Okay, picture Kuf Gimel over here. So picture Kuf Gimel, you see, take a look towards the north first. So you see that if you look at the middle row, you have 3. And you look on either side of that, you have 2. Right? Am I making myself clear? So you have a vineyard. The black dots are the imaginary trees. The round white are the real trees. Right? This picture Kuf Beis, just with the trees deleted already, pre-deleted. So the black trees are imaginary trees because he said whenever you have 5, you imagine as if there's a 6th one there as well. So therefore, if you look towards the north, you have 5 on the towards the east and 5 towards the west, and therefore you draw imaginary trees there, right? Now look all towards the south. The same idea reflects on the south. You see that, right? Again, you have 5 towards the east and 5 towards the west, and therefore you draw 2 imaginary trees, right? Now look towards east and west. Towards east and west, you only have one set of 5 to each direction, right? So therefore you draw 1 imaginary tree in the east and 1 imaginary tree in the west. Is all that clear? It's a relatively simple picture, right? What trees, just a minute, what trees can't you draw in? The corner trees. There's no way to make the corner trees imaginary 6 trees. So you have 10 trees here, you have 6 imaginary trees, and you have 4 corners which are open. You can't draw them as imaginary trees. Yes.
Why can't you draw those corners?
How do they fit into any configuration of 6? 6 real trees. Has to be in configuration. They have to be the 6th in configuration of 5 plus them. There's no such configuration.
What do you think about north to south? You have 5? You have 4.
Here you have 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And
if one of these imaginary trees were real, then you could draw in the corner.
That's right. One imaginary tree is real, could draw in the corner. That's correct. But they're not. Okay? Okay? Now the Gemara says that if you see all the fine print of the Gemara, do you realize how much time the Farshim tried to explain this because they didn't have pictures? We have pictures, so we have life easy. I don't know. Shtay keneged shtay v'achas nitzu shtay keneged shtayim achas yotzizonov in one direction, 2 by 2 with 1 more in one direction. Shtay keneged shtay v'achas yotzizonov in another direction. Shtay keneged shtay v'achas yotzizonov in a third direction. Shtay keneged shtay v'achas yotzizonov in a fourth direction. In all 4 directions, you'll have 2 plus 2 and 2 by 2, and then an extra one. At roe kilu acheretz the tuakan. So therefore, wherever you have 2 plus 2 plus 1, so you're drawing an imaginary tree, right? Kilu acheretz the tuakan, kilu acheretz the tuakan, kilu acheretz the tuakan, and the Rash Siruleh throws in, of course, kilu acheretz the tuakan, right? Because in 4 directions you have imaginary trees, which really are 16 imaginary trees, 6 imaginary trees altogether, right? Yeah, kilu is like kilu, right? Lita kan einat yochol. Now, you might ask the question, lita here doesn't mean to plant, even though it normally means to plant. It says, why don't we draw an imaginary tree in the corners? Lita meaning let's draw imaginary trees in the corners. So lita kan einat yochol kimo shu zonav vein zonav lezonav. This is, you would be a tail for a tail, and you can't make a tail for a tail, right? That's what he drew in on picture Kuf Gimel. You can't make a tail for a tail. It's not possible to say such a thing. Okay? And now we have to repeat this 4 times as well. Litakane yochel sheyu zonav v'ein zonav zonav. Litakane ad yochel shu zonav ein zonav l'zonav. Litakane ad yochel shu zonav ein zonav l'zonav. And one more time, which is not in the Gemara, which the Rashi or later throws in. Litakane ad yochel shu zonav ein zonav l'zonav. Okay? Hadamara, this also teaches us this statement Rabbi Zira. Another thing. Now here's a major typo, which the Gra points out. Shenosnim, it should be that we do give. Shenosnim gazon of lekerem katon la'asoso gadol. If you take a little picture Kuf Gimel, if you draw in the imaginary tree to which the bottom arrow is pointing, see the arrow at the bottom? That's pointing to an imaginary tree which we draw in. If you draw in that tree, which is imaginary, and you draw in the imaginary tree either kitty corner from it, or the imaginary tree on the other side of the real tree in the bottom row, you're making a kerem gadol. What's the kerem gadol you're making? A kerem gadol of 9 trees. And the halacha is, we learned last night, the end last parak, that a kerem gadol nafkaminas, that kerem gadol has special stringencies with mochla kerem, with planting between it and a fence. You can't just distance yourself for amos, you need 16 amos. So therefore, we see here, by virtue of the fact that Rabbi Zira is willing to draw on all these trees, that not only do we give a kerem, a zonav, but we give it a zonav, and as a result make it a kerem gadol. Because you're going to draw in, let's take the easiest one to identify actually. When you have the 3 in the second row across, there are 4 across in this picture, but 3 across, right? And then another 3 across, right? In the 4th row, even though there are 4 across. Then you have 1 in the bottom row, so nonetheless we have a lumdisha 9, right? Because there are 2 black dots in the bottom row which represent hypothetical trees, right? Imaginary trees. And therefore that array constitutes a kerem gadol of 9 trees, and you have the parameters of machal kerem start kicking in. Okay. Says the Gemara, Hadab Shilta Shilta Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Zina B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan. This resolves the question of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Zina named Rabbi Yochanan, who says that you do make a zana for a kerem katan. In order to make it a kerem gadol, kila chesed to a kan, it's as if another one is planted there. Now, the problem is like this. Nimtu shishim arba, I got a problem here. I'm sorry. Getting back to the original scenario, what was Rabbi Zira showing them? Rabbi Zira was showing them a vineyard of 9 by 7. That's the picture on the flip side of the same page. Picture tzadik test. Now you have 9 by 7. How many gaps are there between 9 trees? Gaps. No, don't. 8 gaps. We'll get that later on. There are 8 gaps. How many gaps are there between 7 trees? 6 gaps. Okay, how much is each gap in the vineyard? Generally speaking, 8 amos, right? No less than 4, but no more than 8. Okay? So 8 times 8 is 64. 8 times 6, the other direction where there's 6 gaps, is 48. 48 by 64 is a heck of a lot bigger than 50 by 50. Remember, we want to find 10 trees in a base saw. A base saw is 2,500 amos squared. 48 by 64 is much larger than that. 48 times 64. Somebody's got a calculator here. I'm for sure going to mess up the math, but I'll tell you what it is anyway. It's a lot bigger. It's 3,072 amos. 3,072 square amos. So that's well over 572 more amos than we need, right? So the question is, can we get Rabbi Zira not just to create a scenario where we have 10 trees on the like the Mishnah, but 10 trees in a base saw like the Mishnah is describing. Now, I'll let you in a little secret. Ultimately, the Gemara fails in this endeavor. But the Gemara is going to try. Okay? The Gemara is going to try to make this situation. Now, it's easy to get 10 trees into 2,500 square amos. But we want to make the case Rabbi Zira pointed out to his Talmidim to be the case which exactly fits the Mishnah. Because Rabbi Zira gave this to them as a case which manifests the traits described in the Mishnah. And it doesn't. That's the problem which the Gemara is going to deal with. Okay? So says the Gemara, 64 by 48. Nasav Tarti Mikar. Now, as those of you who learned Sukkah, remember, Gemaras don't deal with Euclidean geometry, they deal with strip geometry. Strip geometry means we draw all the squares, and we start stripping away squares and putting them in different places in order to change shapes. It's a famous Gemara in Sukkah, Daf Ches, where Tosfos describes how you figure out the area of the circle by stripping away parts of it and putting it into, a grid in order to measure it. Okay? So here it's the same idea. You remember that, Sugya?
It comes up, not only the Sugya, but it also comes up
In all those?
Yeah.
It's likely. I haven't learned all those in some time, but yeah. Same idea. Okay, so that's how they used to do geometry, strip geometry. Okay, so that means we have to start splicing with, that's with picture Kuf Dalet. We have a strip of 48 by 64. We got to start cutting and pasting in order to make this work, okay? So it says more, Nasav Tarti Mikar, V'yav Lo Nocha. So take from the side which has 60, take from the end of the side which is 64, 2 amos, right? And add it on to the 48, right? Add on to the 48. Start stripping, right? Now basically, all the Gemara is going to do is exercise in futility. Because no matter what, we're going to end up with 572 extra amos. Now, but the Gemara is going to do it its way, which is by doing strip geometry and proving it to us, right? So it says, I'll tell you what you do. Take away 2 amos by 48 in order to make 2 amos by 48 in order to make it longer, right? Nasav Tarti Mikar v'yoav lo noch, and put it over there. Nimtzu arbaim v'shmona arbaim v'shmona. So you have 48 by 48. The truth is, what he means to say is that you take away. So he means you take away this the take a look on picture Kuf Dalet. See on the bottom, handwritten, he has the words Noto Mina Ratzua Beis Amos. So if you separate, first thing you do is you make a 48 by 48 square. Okay? Then you take off the extra 16 amos, right? Now you have a 16 amos by 48, right? That you have extra 16 by 48. So take off 2 of those 16 by 48 and tack them on to make 50, right? Right? 1 on each side, right? They'll make 50, right? So again, that's what he writes in the fine print here about him. Notu min hatzur shtei amos al boim v'shmona umabikam el amrum, and we stick them onto the square lashlimu chamishim in order to make up 50. Umenishor utzu yud beis. Right now we're left with 12 by 48. Okay, after we took off 2 amos on each side in order to add on, so now we're left with 12 by 48. I'm not sure I'm making myself clear, but you get the idea. We start off with 16 by 48 as the excess, so take off 2 amos and add it on to each side. Now you're left with 12 by 48. Okay?
Right.
Okay? So it says the Gemara, Chad bene akar. Now, but that doesn't fill up the whole thing, because if I drew that for you, what I'd really have is, since I start out with 48 by 48, and I added 2 amos on each side, I'm not drawing to scale, right? So I'm still missing this square in the corner, right? I'm still missing. I added on here and here, but I'm still missing the additional square in the corner, right? Because I took strips of 2 by 48 from my excess and stuck them on. So I still have to make up the missing in the corner, which is another 2 by 2, right? So it says the Gemara, and that's what the Gemara wants you to do now. Chad bene akar. I forgot what bene means. Chad bene, one strip. He says bene is a strip of 2 by 2. Chad bene akar, take one strip away. Chad bene yoev, and put it down in that corner. Still, you're missing a substantial amount, right? Because now, what are you left with? You're left with a strip of 14, that's this picture over here, 14 by 46 by 48, well, you get the idea, right? You're missing, in other words, I had my strip after I applied these 2 amos on each side, so I still left with 14 by, was that by 12? Sorry, 12 by 48. Now, I took off 2 by 2 amos. Well, I'm still left with almost 12 by 48, just missing a 2 by 2 block on this block in the corner, right? So that's what I'm holding right now. So what do I do now? Karach the sheishesrei al sheishesrei. I'll tell you what I do next. Take off 16 by 16. What's 16 by 16? So this is a very interesting thing which he's telling us. He's saying that, look, in each corner here, Rav Zera doesn't have a tree. There's no tree in the corner, right? So if there's no tree in the corner, you could take off a maximum of 16 by 16. Why 16 by 16? Because I started off having, there was a tree here and a tree here which I took out, right? So this was 8 and 8, and this was 8 and 8. That's the trees I took out already when I started making the thing emptier. So okay, I can take out 16 by 16 over here, 16 by 16 over here, 16 by 16 over here, and 16 by 16 over there. Those are the corners because the corners don't count. Because those trees I can't draw in. I'm still going to be missing. Okay? Karach sheishesrei. Take that out. Fine. But nonetheless, I got that'll leave me with much too much missing. Now let's make that cheshbon for a minute. Remember, we said you're missing, you have too much over. You have 3,072, right? That's how much. So you're over by 575 by 572. If you take off 16 by 16, each 16 by 16 is, what's 16 times 16? 96, 16, 256. Is that correct? 16 by 16, 256? You take off 256 times 4, because of each of the corners, so you're taking off way too much. That means you're taking off 800, here, you're right, 1,024. 1,024. Well, you only want to take off 572, right? So if you take off 1,024, that's bad. You take off much too much. You're left with less than the best base off. So that's why God needs to put some back. When am I going to put some back? You following so far what's going on? He started off with 3,072 squared, right? So now we're trying to make it smaller to get down to 2,500 by taking off the 4 corners where there are no trees, real or imaginary. But that leaves us way under. Because 3,072 minus 1,024 leaves us with 2,048, which is 400 some odd too short, right? 452 too short. So how's he going to reconcile? What are we going to do here? So it says, I'll tell you what we can do. I'll tell you what we'll do. Somebody mentioned this before. In this case, you have 4 amos of avodah on each side. In other words, you've taken into account the size of the vineyard without adding on the avodah sakerim. What's the avodah sakerim? Outside, on each side, you get 2,000. By the way, I just realized. I forgot. So all the math is on top of page of Gimel. See that? The original which the original size, which he had 3,072. You take off the plates at the corners, which is 1,024. You're left with 2,048. We still need to make up 452 in order to get all the way up to the 2,500. So says the Gemara, I got an eitzah. What to do? What do? I add on 4 amos on each side, which is the avodas hakerem. 4 amos on each side by the length of the kerem on that side. Now, what's the length of the kerem on each side? Let's figure that out. Says the Gemara, avodoso b'shmona amos, which means not literally 8 amos, rather 4 amos on the east, 4 amos on the west, 4 amos on the north, and 4 amos on the south. Okay, so that if we add that on, I forget how much that is.
So that's 16. So that's 16 square amos in each corner.
What? No. It's look in this picture on page Kuf Gimel. Picture Kuf Gimel. The 4 amos avodas hakerem would be like this. Let me draw them in here. On each side, get 4 amos like that. 4. Okay, that's how you make it up, but make up some of it. Okay? So if we drew that in, I forgot how much that adds on.
What about the imaginary trees? You can't cut into that, right?
No, that you want to add on. We're missing now 452 amos. So we're trying to add on those 4. We're trying to get up those 452 somehow. So he says here. Well, let's take a look at here at page Gimel where he makes the cheshbon. He says if you add on 4 amos on each side, we originally had 64. We originally had 64 by 48, right? The original cheshbon was 64 by 48. Add on to each side 8 amos, right? 4 on each side. So add on to 64, 8. That makes 72, right? Add on to 48, 8. That makes 56. So now the new cheshbon is 72 times 56, right? Which is 4,032, right? How would deduct from that the Malkum HaKronos? Minus 1,024. Still got a problem. Because what are you left with? 3,008. You're still 508 over where you want to be. Okay? Is that clear? We added on the Shmona for Avoda. 4 on each side of the Keren. We're still way over. We're over by 508 now. In other words, we're not under anymore, but we're over them more than we're under. We're under before by 452, and now we're over by 508. Okay? So says the Gemara, let's see it inside. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with the avoda? V'avodosa toch pesa or chutz v'avodosa? Are you going to make the avoda a tacked on, or the avoda is part and parcel of it? If you're going to assume that it and its avoda are within the besa, so ashkach, so in that case you find chaser, that you're missing big typo here. You're missing 508. It should be chaser chamesh mosan uvitamnaya. Whatever number it says here is incorrect. You're missing 500. In other words, if you add on the avodah and take it into account in building this scenario here, so you come up by 508 over 3,008 instead of 2,500. So if however you take the scenario of Rabbi Zira, besides the avodah, without the avodah, in other words, the original dimensions of 64 by 48, so then ashkach yeser, then what you're going to have is that the 2,500 is going to be more than this amount. You're going to be missing 452 because 2,500 is 452 more. Okay? Now it says more. Maybe you'll give a nice, easy answer, which is, you know what? Let's assume we're not using the avodah hakerem. So it's 64 by 48, not 72 by 56, and it's 2,048. So just spread the trees apart a little bit more. Make them a little bit further apart. So it takes up 2,500. You can't do that, says the one. Ukimo Paugus. If you, which the Grashler changes to Muflogos. If you spread the trees apart anymore, B'yachidus, you wouldn't have a vineyard. Because the tree's already maxed out. Because what's the separation between each tree? 16 amos here. Right? Because you took out a row in the middle. That's maxed. If you went to 17, you lose your whole vineyard. From each tree, you'd only have to distance yourself like from a solitary grapevine. So therefore, therefore you can't move the trees apart. Ha-hein in tema barotzef. So maybe the trees you can move the trees a little bit closer together. In other words, let's take it the other way. Let's use the avodah zakir. Let's use the 4 amos extra on each side. Hi, then we come up with 508 too much, right? We come up 3,008 instead of 2,500. So let's squeeze the trees in a little bit, because after all, we can move the trees in. Now we can do. They don't have to be 16 amos apart. They can be They can be up to 4 amos. Anything up to over 4 amos is fine. So let's squeeze the trees in a little bit. So says the Gemara, you can't do that either. Hey, tema barotzef. Won't work because Lotina Elo Esek finally the base we're trying to come up with a scenario where there are only going to be 10 in the 2,500. And if you start squeezing them in, then you can have more than 10 in that area. Okay? Have our conclusion is Lomati Tanye. Rabbi Zira cannot work out with our Mishnah. Doesn't work out. Rabbi Zira, who showed the case, who was Talmidim of a vineyard which had 63 trees, and tried to describe them a hypothetic in which it would go down to 10, could do that. But you can't get it to be exactly 2,500 square amos like the Mishnah is discussing. Okay? Says the Gemara further. New issue. By the way, we've done almost 2 blot already, right? Yeah. Yeah. Hanof Mechuvan. We're going to do till Mishnah Gimel though tonight anyway. Hanof Mechuvan. There's plenty of time. Hanof Mechuvan. V'kaveres ein Mechuvan. I'm sorry, skip. Hakaveres Mechuvan. Now, I read a kaveres. I think it's supposed to be kores, but I'm not sure because I don't have the kudos. But kores means the trunk of the tree. Before we had kores meaning cabbage or cress. Here kores means the trunks of the tree. That which you chop down. Right, so it should be kores here. Kores means that which you chop down. You know, the trunk which you chop down. Okay? So kores mechuvan, what if you have a vineyard where the trunks are in line, but the foliage is not. The foliage of each tree zigzags in a different direction. I don't care. Look at the trunks, I don't look at the foliage. Hanof mechuvan, and therefore the opposite case, if the foliage is in line, but the trunks are not in line, eno kerem, it's not a kerem. Even it looks pretty from the air, it's got to be that the trunks are aligned. What if when they were younger trees, they were saplings, they weren't in a straight line, but then when they grew larger, wider, they turned out to be a straight line, that's a vineyard. How do you know if they're in a straight line? Maybe you bring a string and you stretch it from tree to tree. Now how you stretch it from tree to tree to tree? Like picture Kufay. See picture Kufay? Well, either on the inside or the outside. That's going to be an issue here. But it has to be consistent, right? Well, let's all see. So
is this similar to when you have 2 shiurs and you have a tree on one side of the fence and the overhang is on the other side?
Yeah.
According to the tree.
No, we hold the overhang there cancels the fence. Yeah, we say it does cancel the fence. Okay, that's not consistent with that. Maybe you bring a string and you stretch it. Some say stretch the string between the 2 rows. Right, like we have at the first diagram of Kufay. These tiny and others say that it's outside the 2 rows, like the second diagram of Kufay. Rabbi Yehuda said, we do it on the inside. They don't have to be exact. They have to be within a tefach of the string. In other words, They don't have to be perfectly aligned. They don't have to be aligned. They have to, as long as they're within a tefach of the string, that's sufficient. However, Malam Rechut, where he says you measure on the outside, it has to touch all the trees. There can't be any deviation whatsoever. I'm not fully, even partially sure why we're much more stringent when doing on the outside, like the second diagram of Kufi, than when doing on the inside. But that's what Gemara is saying. When you're taking the survey on the inside, they can be off by up to a tefach. When you're taking the survey on the outside, they can't be off at all. Yes?
I guess I'm intrigued by the measure of the tefach here. This is certainly totally not analogous. This reaches for like an arrow, like or something.
Yeah.
So I look at this as like a breach of the it's not analogous. I can't figure why you use the measure of the tefach.
Right. It's rather small, but at least it's, I can't answer your question, but I want to note that at least it's more lenient than having to have it exactly mechumen. I understand the tefach as being a margin of error, and I don't really understand why when you measure it on the outside of the trees, they don't even give you that margin of error. I have difficulty with that. I don't understand what the difference is.
I'm looking at it, this is a breach of the way the tree growing.
Right, so you want it to be 3 tefachim. Truth is, though, I want to point out a lumdisha thing, which is important, which is that Ilovud would not be really relevant here. In other words, I'm not trying to deny you of deprive you of your question, but there's no love because we don't say aim lovud lavir. But lovud is only to connect 2 existing objects. You can't say lovud to place something closer in. Okay? This is an explicit Erev in modern metropolitan areas. It's there. It's read it. If you read it every Shabbos in Skokie, I won't go any further than that because I'm taping. It's somewhere over here. That's right. It's somewhere over here. But in any event, you don't say love with love here. Yeah. Page 9. Okay. Okay, he says more further. Rabbi Yehuda said, we just said, now here's a very interesting kula. Picture number Kuf. You see, you have rows of vineyards, and the last row is not aligned properly. The outer row is not aligned properly. It's not opposite the other trunks. It's not considered to be a keren. It's not like Beis Shammai. According to Beis Shammai, single rows are krumim. Like Beis Hillel, where only double rows are krumim. So since this row is not like the other ones, these trees are not a keren. They're like single trees. Therefore, you only have to distance yourself 6 tefachim from those trees. Okay? Nosa Avodas Zeres Amuta. Rabbi Yossi said, this is the catch. If you plant within 6 tefachim of those trees, of course it's also. But what if you plant with the outside of 6 tefachim of those trees? But within 4 amos of the second row. This is a good chat. You're planting within 4 amos of the second row, outside of 6 tefachim of the first row. Which is possible, right? So in that case, chutz l'shisha, where it's outside of 6 of the first row, but within 4 of the second row, hakforni mutaros. The outer row is mutar, because from that you distance yourself the sufficient amount. But kerem, the second row is also, because this kerem is within 4 amos. So again, you planted more than 6 tefachim away from the outer row, but within 4 amos of the second row. The first row is mutter, the second row is also. It's totally paradoxical, but hey, that's kilayim. Okay? Says Gemara,
there's no Marasayan issue here.
what?
There's no Marasayan issue here.
No, it's no Marasayan, right. Here it's just pure technicality. Just pure technicality. Ezu Kerem Dao. What's a Kerem Dao? Rabbi Yerushalmi said, Dao Vikfarim, where you only have 10 trees in a 2,500 square mile area, but there are many open spaces. There's rich and open spaces. So everything is relative. You can be poor in built-up area and rich in open spaces. Okay, Aloha base. Kerem Shunutu Apachos Mi4 Amos. You got a vineyard, and you left less than 4 amos between the trees. I'm sure there ain't no kerem. It's not a kerem. Chachamim say it is a kerem. Why? We look at every other row as if it's not there. And that way, once you look at every other row, if it's not there, so therefore between the rows which you're leaving, in your hypothetical imagery, you do have 4 amos between each one. And that's why it does constitute a vineyard. Okay? Says the Gemara, Amlem Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon said, Osam Shatem Omrim. It really should be Atem. You say, Roy Metzem Tzos Kilu Einon. You look at the middle rows as if they're uprooted. Hareini Korn. Maybe those are the ones he intends to leave. Maybe those are primary things. That's how you know you look at the middle ones as if not there. Maybe those are the ones he wants to keep. Right? So says what a very interesting issue. Alright, China said, Hadamara. The machlokes between Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan is Kishoyu Sheish Keneged Sheish. It's like picture Kuf Zayin. We have 6 opposite 6. So there, Rabbanan holds it's a kerem. Because you look at the middle ones as if they're already taken away. Rabbi Shimon holds it's not a kerem because you don't know which ones you're going to take away. Right? Because you might take away Aleph, Gimel, and Hey, or you might take away Beis, Dalet, and Vav. So since you don't know, so in that case I'd say, it says they're not considered to be a kerem. However, if it's kuf, like picture kuf ches, we only have 5 trees. Everybody agrees to look at Beis and Dalet as if they're not there. Because in that case, it's clear which are the ones which are going, Beis and Dalet are going. Okay? So even Rabbi Shimon would agree in that case. That's Rabbi Chanina. Raimon argues. Rabbi said, when is there machlokes and mishnah? When it's 5 opposite 5 like kuf ches. In that Rabbanan holds it's Pasha going to take away Beis and Dalet. Rav Shimon holds, who knows? Maybe Beis and Dalet, the trees he likes. Those are his Fido and Rover. The ones which are precious to him. Maybe he's going to keep those. Right? But in the picture Kuf Zayin, we have 6 opposite 6. In that case, ilu atroye esim tzoyos kilu einon elu elu. If you're going to say you don't look at the middle ones, which are going to be the middle ones? In other words, there even Rabbanan agree, according to his perspective, that we don't know which ones are going to go. So it's very according to Rabbi Chanina, everybody agrees in Kuf Ches that you're for sure going to take off Beis and Dalet. And the machlokas is by Kuf Zayin, where I don't know which one you're going to take off. According to Ramona, everybody agrees in Kuf Zayin, where you have 6. That since I don't know which one I'm going to take off, it's not a kerem. But and Kuf Ches is the machlokas by 5 across, whether I know you're going to take off Beis and Dalet, or I still don't know which ones you're going to take off. Okay? Says the Gemara.
Maybe she meant to give it to her daughter.
What is that which it means? That we look at them and as if they're not there. Rav Huna says an amazing chiddush. Kilayim! It's an amazing thing, Kilayim. He says, Shemuter lad loisam al garbi here, it's a type which should be zroim. Beis and Dalet are still there, but they're not there halachically. I can plant grain right there. Right underneath their foliage. There's grapevines there. It don't matter. According to Rabbanan who says they're made to uproot, it's as if they're uprooted already.
There's no Marasayan issue?
Because everybody knows they're going.
Everyone knows?
Anyone know?
Mara's always afraid about people who might think.
Someone else or her husband doesn't get it, what does she do?
Sorry. You're looking for chumrah. I found you kula. You don't like it. Okay. Says the Gemara.
I just want consistency.
That's right.
Yeah. Kame the cuts, it's cuts, it's tabby. That's right. Okay? Armai Mana said, Hadam Isayah, this whole issue is a riot to Rabbi Yossi. L'adam Rabbi Yossi, which Rabbi Yossi said, which you just saw before the Mishnah. That Ima used Roim, B'soch Shisha Koloser, if in that case where the outer row, picture Kuvav, the outer row is out of sync. So there Rabbi Yossi said, if this Roim are within 6 tvachim of the outer row, everything is Osir. If it's out of, it's beyond 6 tvachim the outer row, within 4 amos of the middle of the next row, so then funny mutaros va'kerem also the outer row is mutar and the kerem itself is osir. So why is this a raya to Rabbi Yossi? Because over here we see Rabbi Yimona wants to say not like Rav Huna. Rav Huna said where we look at Beis and Dalet and picture of Ches as if they're not there, you can plant right underneath them. And that Ramona's argument says not quite. It means that Beis and Dalet are not going to be part and parcel of a vineyard. So you can plant as long as it's a distance of 6 tvachim away from them. But still, you're not allowed to plant right under them or right up against them. He doesn't go that far. But it's a riot for Rabbi Yossi because, what he's saying, because he's saying that we look at Beis and Dalet, add that they have to be 6 tvachim away from your Zroim, even though Aleph, Gimel, and Hey, which are interspersed with them, they have a shiur of 4 amos. So you see that shiur is relative based on what we're dealing with, even though all these trees are in close proximity. Shimon Bar Bo, B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan said, Kshem Shein Chalukin Kan. Just like they argue over here, Kach Chalukin B'Shchunas Kvaros. So too they argue by neighborhoods of graves. This is a Bosnia type issue. You have mass burials. So there's halacha. I don't mean mass burials. There are a lot of graves. Not one burial for many people, but many graves in the same area. You're digging. And you find a whole bunch of graves. 3 graves. And between each grave you find the proper shiur, which is 1 amma. So then you have to assume you stumbled on a graveyard. And you have to track 20 amos in each direction from the graves to see if there are additional graves nearby. That's called the Shchunas Kvaros. Okay? Again, you find 3 at the proper distance from each other, which is 1 amma. So I assume that there are other graves in the vicinity. You have to track 20 amos in each direction. Okay? Check 20 amos in each direction, make sure there are no additional graves. Now, what happens if you found them much closer together? In other words, each grave was within 1 amma of the other. So that case, I say it's not a graveyard because it's not done properly. Rather, it's a mass grave, and therefore I don't have to track 20 amos in each direction. Now, the Gemara's question is the same question we have over here by vines. What if you find there are 5 graves, and the 1, 3, and 5 are planted the right distance, but 2 and 4 are in the middle, taking away the right distance. But if you remove 2 and 4, 1, 3, and 5 will be the right distance from each other. What's the halacha in this case? So there's also going to be same halacha about Rabbi Shimon, right? According to Rabbi Shimon, so what? Right now they're too close together. There's no Shchunas Kvaros here. According to Rabbanan, no. We look at the middle ones, 2 and 4, as if they're not there, and 1, 3, and 5 are properly spaced, and therefore it's a graveyard. I have to track 20 opposite directions to make sure there are no additional graves. That's how I want to say the machlokas is over there. Parallel to our machlokas. Rabbi Yeina, boo. It doesn't say boo in my Gemara, but maybe it says your Gemara. It's not true. Lo damya. It's not comparable. Taman meruvachim. They're very basic distinctions from us. They're meruvachim. If originally they were spread apart properly, or it's often and you bury people in between, then Yeshem Shchunas Kvaros, they don't lose their status as being in the neighborhood of graves. It's just that later on somebody did something aberrant. So that's a logic to give it a halach of Shchunas Kvaros there, even if things are too close together. Right? Ritzufin and vice versa. Let's say they were planted too close, they were buried too close together. And then, in other words, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 too close together. And then you remove 2 and 4. You're removing 2 and 4, it doesn't make the Shchunas Kvaros. In other words, the reality is not impacted on by your adjusting the situation either way. The reality is independent of your adjusting it by taking away and making it more dispersed, or it doesn't make a difference whether originally there was a graveyard here and then you planted too close together. Whatever the reality once was is what the reality remains forever. Okay? However, here reality is determined by planting right now. There's no prior reality we have to distinguish. Reality is taking place in the here and now. If they were too far apart, we're trying to put them a little close together. Then the machlokas, then you have the machlokas Rabbi Shimon Rabbana. If they're too close together and then you space them apart, everybody agrees that case attack is a vineyard. But I'm asking the machlok is there by the graveyard. It's something else altogether. It's a case where you found them too close together. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Ani Omer. Rabbi Shimon says, Omer Ani, I say Gal Nafalem Ritzafan. That the reason why they're so close together is because they were buried in a mass grave, and the avalanche fell on them, and they all got buried together. Rabbanan say originally they were further spread apart, and then people ran out of graveyard space and planted between them. But it's not the same issue as here, because here the reality of the halach is manipulated by how you spread the vineyards now. Whereas there we have to determine what happened historically when this graveyard was active. So therefore, there's no comparison between the two issues. That's what Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan say there. Although it looks similar, it's not. Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan here are arguing about spacing in the here and now, and what you can do by everybody agrees if you did uproot the trees, then they are spaced properly. Of course, it's a vineyard. The question is if we look at it as if you uprooted them or not. There, however, what you're doing now will have no relevance to what happened historically 20 centuries ago, whenever this was actively being used as a graveyard. So therefore, you have to see how to look at it in the historical perspective. And Shimon says, we look in the historical perspective as it's a mass grave. And Rabbanan say, we look at it that it was a proper graveyard, and therefore you have to take 20 opposite each direction, and that which people are buried too close together was a later development sometime later in history. Okay? Stop here for tonight.